My name is Ada, and I am 58 years old. The day my son Jackson called me his cleaner at his wedding dinner because of my neck tumor was the day everything changed. After spending $150,000 on his perfect day, watching him introduce his father's girlfriend as his real mother broke something inside me. I left silently that night, but what I did next shocked everyone, especially Jackson. Let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button, and join me as I share how a mother's love turned to strength when disrespect came from the one person I sacrificed everything for. I never thought I would be telling this story, but some wounds only heal when exposed to the light. My journey as a single mother began 28 years ago, when my husband Frank decided our marriage was no longer worth fighting for. Jackson was only 4, then a bright-eyed boy with his father's smile and my determination. Frank moved out on a rainy Tuesday, packed his belongings into his blue sedan, and drove away without looking back. He promised to stay involved in Jackson's life, but those promises evaporated like morning dew under the harsh sun of his new priorities. I rebuilt our life brick by brick. We moved from our spacious suburban house to a modest 2-bedroom apartment closer to my workplace. I took on extra hours at the insurance company where I worked as an underwriter, sometimes bringing paperwork home to complete after tucking Jackson into bed. Those early years were difficult, but filled with small joys. Jackson's first day of school weekend trips to the local park bedtime stories that grew more elaborate as his imagination flourished. Despite Frank's sporadic presence, Jackson thrived. He excelled academically, joined the debate team in high school, and eventually earned a partial scholarship to attend State University. I remember the pride that swelled in my chest when he graduated with his business degree, the first in our family to complete college. Throughout those years, Frank's child support payments were inconsistent at best, completely absent at worst. I never complained to Jackson about it, believing that a child shouldn't carry the weight of adult problems. 5 years ago, my life took another unexpected turn. What I initially dismissed as a swollen lymph node from a lingering cold turned out to be something more serious. After numerous tests and a biopsy, the doctor delivered the diagnosis: a benign parotid tumor. Though not cancerous, its location on my neck made it complicated. The first surgery removed most of it, but complete extraction risked damage to facial nerves. I opted for the safer approach, which left me with a visible asymmetry on the right side of my neck. Recovery was harder than expected. The medical bills piled up despite my insurance. I had to take 8 weeks off work, using most of my saved vacation days and some unpaid leave. Jackson had just started his job at a marketing firm in the city and was building his own life. He visited when he could, bringing groceries and keeping me company during those long, painful weekends of recovery. The tumor changed how people saw me. I caught the stares, the quick aversion of eyes when I noticed the uncomfortable questions from well-meaning acquaintances. Over time, I adapted. High-collared blouses and strategically placed scarves became staples in my wardrobe. I returned to work with my head held high, though I noticed how conversations sometimes halted when I approached the break room. 3 years after my diagnosis, Jackson met Sandra. He brought her to dinner at my apartment, and I immediately saw the spark between them. Sandra worked in finance, came from an affluent family, and had an elegant poise that spoke of private schools and summer vacations in Europe. She was polite during that first meeting, complimenting my home-cooked lasagna and asking appropriate questions about my work, but I sensed a certain reserve in her manner. Their relationship progressed quickly. Within 8 months, Jackson called with the news of their engagement. I was genuinely happy for him, though a small part of me worried about the differences in their backgrounds. "Mom, we want a proper wedding," he told me during a Sunday lunch at my place. "Sandra's parents expect certain standards." I understood what remained unspoken. This would be expensive. "I have some savings," I assured him, already mentally calculating what I could contribute. What I didn't say was that those savings were meant for my retirement and potential future medical needs. Around this time, Frank reappeared in Jackson's life with newfound enthusiasm. He had remarried years ago to Natalie, a woman 15 years his junior. Until the engagement, their contact with Jackson had been limited to holiday cards and occasional phone calls. Suddenly, Frank was interested in wedding plans and eager to reconnect. "Dad wants to be part of the wedding," Jackson informed me one evening. "He and Natalie want to meet Sandra's family." I nodded, swallowing my reservations. This was Jackson's day, and I had no right to complicate it with old resentments. What began as a reasonable wedding budget quickly ballooned. The venue Sandra selected was a historic mansion with manicured gardens. The guest list grew from 60 to 120. Each addition, the premium open bar, the 7-course dinner, the string quartet for the ceremony, came with a hefty price tag. I remortgaged my condominium to cover the mounting expenses, telling myself this investment in Jackson's happiness was worth any sacrifice. The first signs that something was amiss came during the engagement party at Sandra's parents' waterfront home. As guests mingled on the expansive deck overlooking the lake, I noticed how Sandra's mother, Vivian, introduced me to her friends. "This is Jackson's mother," she would say, her tone suggesting an afterthought before quickly steering the conversation elsewhere. No mention of my name, my profession, or any other humanizing detail. I wore a high-necked blue dress that evening, carefully selected to minimize the visibility of my neck. Despite my efforts, I caught Sandra's father, Richard, staring at my neck during dinner, his expression a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away, suddenly very interested in his roasted salmon. Jackson seemed different that night, too. He circulated among the guests, with Sandra at his side, stopping at every cluster of people except where I sat. When I approached him near the dessert table, his smile tightened slightly. "Are you enjoying yourself, Mom?" he asked, glancing over my shoulder as if looking for an escape route. "Everything is lovely," I assured him. "Sandra's parents have been very generous." "Yes, well, they know how to host properly," he replied, and something in his tone made me flinch internally. Before I could respond, he was pulled away by Sandra's college roommate, who insisted on a photo. In the weeks that followed, Jackson became increasingly difficult to reach. My calls went to voicemail more often than not. When we did speak, our conversations were brief, with Jackson always claiming to be busy with work or wedding preparations. When I offered to go dress shopping with Sandra, he hesitated. "Actually, Mom, Sandra's going with her mother and sisters. It's kind of their thing." "Of course," I said, ignoring the sting. "But I'd love to help with something. Maybe the flowers or the menu tasting." "Natalie's actually helping with that," he replied, mentioning his father's wife with an ease that surprised me. "She used to work in event planning and knows all about this stuff." I first met Richard, Sandra's father, at a dinner arranged to discuss wedding details. The restaurant was far more upscale than anywhere I would normally dine, with white tablecloths and waiters who silently appeared and disappeared like ghosts. I wore a scarf draped carefully over my neck despite the warm spring evening. "So, Ada," Richard said after ordering an expensive bottle of wine without consulting the table. "Jackson tells me you work in insurance. Fascinating field." His tone suggested it was anything but fascinating. "Yes, I've been with the same company for 22 years now," I replied. "Loyalty, admirable." His eyes drifted to my neck, then quickly away. "And you're covering most of the wedding costs, I understand. Very generous given your circumstances." The pause spoke volumes. I felt my cheeks warm, but maintained my composure. Jackson deserves the best. We all want that for him. Later that evening, I excused myself to use the restroom. As I returned, I overheard Jackson and Sandra talking in a quiet alcove near the coat check. "Your mom seems nice," Sandra was saying, "but are you sure she'll be comfortable at the country club reception? People can be judgmental, and with her condition." "I know," Jackson sighed. "It's embarrassing sometimes. Dad suggested we could seat her somewhere less central during the dinner." Maybe with my distant cousins, who won't mind. I froze, unable to believe what I was hearing. The Jackson I raised would never have spoken those words. I slipped away and returned to the table with a fixed smile, pretending I'd heard nothing. Despite this, I tried to understand. Perhaps Jackson was just anxious about everything being perfect. Maybe he was trying to impress his future in-laws, and Natalie's sudden interest in his life had temporarily clouded his judgment. I told myself these things as I wrote another check for the wedding photographer, as I scheduled fittings for dresses that would adequately cover my neck, as I practiced my mother of the groom speech in front of my bathroom mirror. One afternoon, I received a surprise visit from Frank and Natalie. They wanted to discuss the rehearsal dinner, which Frank had magnanimously offered to host after 15 years of minimal financial support. Natalie was everything I wasn't. Tall, slender, with perfectly highlighted hair and an outfit that screamed expensive taste. She spoke with authority about the wedding plans, mentioning details I hadn't been informed of. Jackson loved the cake samples we tried last week, she commented casually, dropping the fact that she had been included in an event I wasn't even aware had happened. I didn't know the cake tasting had already taken place, I said carefully. Oh, it was very last minute, Frank interjected. Sandra called us because they had a cancellation. We wouldn't have excluded you intentionally. But the look that passed between them told a different story. As they left, I noticed a text from Jackson on Natalie's phone screen. Thanks again for yesterday. Mom would have just made it awkward. Those words stayed with me for days. Each time I thought about them, the knife twisted deeper. The son I had raised, comforted, and sacrificed for now found my presence awkward. And worse, he was confiding this to the woman who had replaced me in his father's life. As the wedding date approached, the dynamics became increasingly uncomfortable. Natalie had somehow positioned herself as the wedding coordinator despite my financial contribution dwarfing anything she and Frank provided. She called vendors, made decisions, and relayed information to me as an afterthought. We changed the floral arrangements to roses instead of lilies, she informed me during a three-way call with Jackson. Lilies are so funeral-like, don't you think? I thought Sandra loved lilies, I said, remembering a conversation from months earlier. People's tastes evolve, Natalie replied smoothly. Jackson agrees the roses will be more sophisticated, right, honey? Definitely. Jackson concurred, and I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before when addressing me. A slight condescension, as though I couldn't possibly understand sophistication. This pattern repeated itself across every aspect of wedding planning. The venue I had initially toured with Jackson and Sandra was switched to a more expensive location. The photographer I had researched and booked was replaced with someone Natalie recommended. Each change came with additional costs that I silently absorbed, watching my retirement fund dwindle. During a bridal shower, I helped fund but was given minimal input on. I overheard Sandra comparing me to Natalie while speaking to her bridesmaids in the kitchen. It's just that Natalie gets it, you know. She understands our vision. Ada tries, but she's just not from our world, and it's hard to include her in photos with that thing on her neck. I retreated to the bathroom, hands shaking. Looking in the mirror, I saw what they saw. A middle-aged woman with a visible deformity trying desperately to fit into a world that had no place for her. For a moment, shame washed over me. Then anger. Then a profound sadness. At the rehearsal dinner hosted by Frank and Natalie at an exclusive downtown restaurant, I arrived to find my name card placed at a table far from the main wedding party. When I questioned this, the wedding planner, hired by Natalie, paid for by me, explained it was to balance the room. What hurt most was watching Jackson laugh with Frank's arms slung companionably around each other's shoulders, as though the years of absence had never occurred. They posed for father-son photos, Jackson beaming with pride. No one suggested a mother-son picture. That evening, I called my friend Sarah, the one person who had remained steadfastly by my side through divorce, illness, and now this. They're acting like I'm invisible, Sarah. Worse than invisible. Like I'm an embarrassment. "Have you talked to Jackson directly?" she asked. "Really laid it out for him?" I hadn't. I realized I'd been so afraid of creating conflict of being the problem that I'd swallowed every slight. The next day I asked Jackson to meet me for coffee. He arrived 30 minutes late, checking his watch repeatedly to signal his limited time. "I need to talk to you about how things have been going," I began carefully. "Is this about money again?" He sighed. "Because we're almost done with expenses." "It's not about money," I said, though the financial strain was crushing. "It's about respect, Jackson. I feel like I'm being pushed aside in all of this." He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable before his expression hardened. "Look, Mom, I appreciate everything you're doing, but this wedding needs to be perfect. Sandra's family has expectations. Dad and Natalie understand that world better than you do." "And what about me? What about the fact that I raised you alone, that I'm covering most of these costs despite my medical bills? Does that count for nothing?" He glanced around the coffee shop, clearly embarrassed by my rising voice. "Can you not make this about you? Just once. This is my wedding. I just want one perfect day where everything is normal." The word hung between us. Normal. And I understood then what he meant. A day without the reminder of my condition, without the awkwardness my appearance caused in his new social circle. After he left, I sat alone nursing a cold coffee and calculating exactly how much I had spent. The total made me dizzy. $150,000. My entire retirement fund plus a second mortgage on my condominium. For a wedding where I was an afterthought, an embarrassment to be hidden away. That same week, I discovered through a misdirected email that Natalie had been given authority to make final decisions on wedding details I was funding. The email from the wedding planner addressed to Natalie included the line, "As per Jackson's request, I'll run all final approvals through you rather than Ada to streamline communications." I also learned that my carefully planned gift, a honeymoon package I could barely afford, had been upgraded significantly by Jackson and Sandra without consulting me with the expectation that I would cover the difference. Another $12,000 I didn't have. My financial advisor called concerned about the withdrawals from my accounts. "Ada, at this rate, you'll have nothing left for retirement or future medical needs. Are you sure about these expenditures?" I wasn't sure anymore. About anything. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, clear blue skies and a gentle breeze, as though even nature conspired to create Jackson's flawless day. The ceremony was held in the Rose Garden of the Grand Lake Estate, a venue that cost more per hour than I earned in a week. 200 guests, double our original estimate, filled white chairs adorned with blush roses and trailing silk ribbons. I wore a pale blue dress with a high neckline and a matching scarf arranged to minimize the visibility of my tumor. Hours had been spent on my hair and makeup, an expense I justified as necessary to look presentable. The stylist had been recommended by Natalie, of course, and had skillfully worked to draw attention away from my neck. "We'll make you look as normal as possible," she had said, not realizing the sting of her words. The ceremony itself was beautiful. I watched from the front row as Jackson Handsome in his tailored tuxedo waited for Sandra at the altar. When she appeared in her designer gown that cost as much as a small car, I saw the genuine love in my son's eyes and momentarily forgot all the hurt of recent months. This was why I had sacrificed everything, for his happiness. Frank sat on the opposite side of the aisle with Natalie, who wore a form-fitting burgundy dress that turned heads. Sandra's parents occupied the seats of honor beside her, their expressions a mixture of pride and satisfaction. After the vows and the photographs, in which I was positioned at the edge of group shots easy to crop out if desired, the reception began in the estate's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings above tables draped in silk. A 10-piece orchestra played as servers circulated with champagne and appetizers that cost $40 per person. I searched for my place card at the family table but couldn't find it. A helpful server eventually directed me to a table in the far corner of the room near the kitchen doors, where I was seated with distant relatives of Sandra and two elderly friends of her grandmother. None of them knew who I was, and their attempts at conversation faltered when I explained I was the groom's mother. "Oh," said one woman, eyeing my neck before quickly looking away. "How nice." From my isolated position, I watched as Jackson and Sandra made their grand entrance as they shared their first dance as they moved from table to table greeting guests. They never made it to my corner. Frank and Natalie sat at the head table alongside Sandra's parents, laughing and clinking glasses as though they were the true family being joined today. Then came the moment that would change everything: the speeches. Sandra's father spoke first, welcoming Jackson to their family with warmth and humor. Frank followed, talking about watching his son grow into a man, conveniently omitting that he had missed most of that growth. When Jackson stood to give his own speech, I straightened in my chair, hopeful for some acknowledgement of my role in his life. He thanked Sandra's parents for their generosity and guidance. He thanked Frank for showing me how to be a man. And then, glass raised, he turned toward Natalie. "And to Natalie, who has been more of a real mother to me than I ever knew I needed. Your class, your support, and your understanding have meant everything." The room blurred around me. I waited for my name, for some small recognition of my existence. It never came, but worse was yet to follow. As guests asked questions about various family members, someone inquired about me. I saw Jackson hesitate, saw him glance at my corner table, and then at Natalie, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Oh," he said loud enough for half the room to hear. "That's just our former house cleaner. She's been with the family for years and wanted to come. We couldn't say no." Laughter rippled through the crowd. I felt every eye turn to me, taking in my careful makeup, my concealing clothes, the visible lump that no scarf could completely hide. "Actually," Sandra added, her voice carrying clearly, "Natalie is Jackson's real mom in all the ways that count." More laughter. More stares. Frank raised his glass in Natalie's direction, beaming with pride, as though this lie was a wonderful joke they all shared. In that moment, something inside me broke. Not just my heart, which had been breaking slowly for months, but something more fundamental. The unshakable belief that my child would always recognize my worth, even if no one else did. I stood quietly, gathered my small, beaded purse, and walked toward the exit. No scene, no confrontation, no tears where anyone could see them. Just the soft click of the ballroom door as I left behind $150,000 and 28 years of love that had apparently meant nothing. As I reached my car, I turned for one last look at the glittering venue where my son had publicly denied me. Through the large windows, I could see Jackson at the center of the dance floor, spinning Sandra in an elegant circle surrounded by admiring guests. He was smiling, completely unburdened by what had just occurred. In that moment, I realized the son I had raised was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. I drove home in silence, no radio, no phone calls, just the sound of my own breathing as I tried to process what had happened and what would come next. My condominium felt empty when I returned, though nothing had changed except me. I removed my carefully selected outfit, wiped away the expertly applied makeup, and stood before the bathroom mirror, looking at myself, really looking, for the first time in years. The tumor was there, an undeniable part of me. But as I studied my reflection, I saw more than that. I saw the strength in my eyes that had carried me through divorce, single parenthood, illness, and now this ultimate betrayal. I saw the hands that had worked tirelessly to provide for Jackson, to create a home, to write checks that depleted my future security. I saw a woman who had forgotten her own worth while trying to prove it to others. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pulled out financial statements, wedding contracts, and email correspondences, spreading them across my dining table like pieces of a puzzle. Every receipt, every transfer, every agreement that had steadily drained my accounts to fund a celebration where I was labeled the help. The total, $150,000 seemed impossible now that I saw it in black and white. My retirement, my safety net, my future. Around 2 a.m, my doorbell rang. Sarah stood outside, still wearing her reception dress, her expression a mixture of outrage and concern. "I left right after you did," she said, stepping inside and immediately pulling me into a hug. What Jackson did was unforgivable. We talked until sunrise, cups of tea growing cold between us, as I poured out every slight, every exclusion, every moment of hurt I had swallowed over the past months. Sarah listened occasionally, wiping away tears, hers and mine. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked, as golden morning light filtered through my kitchen windows. A clarity I hadn't felt in years settled over me. "I'm going to stop being a doormat," I said. "I'm going to get my money back." First, I consulted with a lawyer, bringing my meticulously kept records of every wedding expense, though there was no formal contract stating the money was a loan rather than a gift. There were emails and texts where Jackson had promised to help pay you back when we're settled, acknowledging the financial strain I was under. "We have enough here to make a strong case," my lawyer advised, "and if nothing else, the threat of public embarrassment might motivate repayment." I also contacted my bank about the second mortgage and my financial advisor about what remained of my retirement fund. The picture was bleak, but not hopeless if I could recover even part of what I had spent. When Jackson and Sandra returned from their honeymoon, the luxury package I had funded, I asked him to meet me. He arrived at my condominium looking tanned and relaxed, seemingly unbothered by his actions at the wedding. "I need to discuss something important," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "If this is about what happened at the reception, I was just joking around," he said dismissively. "You're being too sensitive." "This isn't about my feelings, Jackson. It's about $150,000. His expression changed immediately. "What about it?" "I want it back. All of it. Every penny I spent on your wedding needs to be repaid." He laughed, though I detected nervousness beneath it. "Mom, that was a gift. You can't just ask for gifts back because your feelings got hurt." I slid the folder of documents across my coffee table. "These suggest otherwise. Your texts promising repayment. The emails where you acknowledged the money was beyond my means. The second mortgage I took out specifically for your wedding, which you were fully aware of." As he flipped through the papers, his face paled. "You kept all this? Were you planning this all along?" "No," I said honestly. "I kept records because that's what responsible adults do. I'm giving you 2 options. Work out a repayment plan with me directly, or I'll pursue this legally." "You wouldn't sue your own son," he scoffed, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "The son I raised would never have called me his cleaner, or denied I was his mother," I replied evenly. "So perhaps I would sue this stranger who took advantage of my love and generosity." He stormed out, slamming my door hard enough to rattle the windows. Within hours, Frank called, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. "What the hell do you think you're doing after everything we've done for Jackson?" "We," I repeated. "What exactly did you contribute, Frank?" "Besides showing up at the end to play proud father with your trophy wife." 2 days later, I received a surprising call from Sandra's father. "Ada, I want to apologize," Richard said, sounding genuinely remorseful. "What happened at the wedding was appalling. Sandra is mortified by her behavior and Jackson's." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, genuinely touched by this unexpected alliance. "I've spoken with Jackson," he continued. "He'll be contacting you about repayment, the full amount, and if he doesn't follow through, you'll have my support in pursuing other avenues." I sent Jackson a final text. "I'm giving you 30 days to begin repayment. After that, I'll be forced to take legal action and make public exactly what transpired. Your choice." My decision to stand up for myself extended beyond financial restitution. After years of feeling diminished by my condition, I joined a support group for people with facial differences and medical conditions that affected their appearance. The stories I heard there, of discrimination, exclusion, and resilience. Both broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. "Your worth isn't determined by how people respond to your appearance," said Marcus, a group member with extensive facial scarring. "That took me years to learn." Through the group, I connected with Dr. Eleanor Hayes, a specialist in reconstructive surgery who reviewed my case. "There are newer, less invasive techniques that might help," she explained during our consultation. "The risks are lower than they were 5 years ago, though still significant." I scheduled the surgery, a decision that was about reclaiming control rather than yielding to social pressure. When Jackson learned about my upcoming procedure through Sarah, he suddenly reappeared in my life full of concern. "Why didn't you tell me about the surgery?" he demanded during an unannounced visit. "I had to hear it from Sarah." "Would you have cared?" I asked simply. "Or would it have been another inconvenience, another reminder of my embarrassing condition?" He had no answer for that. A week later, Frank appeared at my door. Age had not been kind to him, and stress had carved deep lines around his mouth. He stood awkwardly in my living room, examining photos on my wall, most of Jackson through various ages. "I need to tell you something," he said finally. "I played a part in how Jackson treated you." I waited, arms crossed. When he and Sandra got engaged, I saw an opportunity to be relevant in his life again. "Natalie and we deliberately tried to edge you out. I told him having you prominently involved would make things awkward for Sandra's family." He looked down at his hands. "I was jealous of your relationship with him, of how he admired you. I wanted that for myself, even if it meant diminishing you." His confession should have been satisfying, but it only left me hollow. "And Natalie? What was her motivation?" "Status," he said bluntly. "She wanted to play mother of the groom, to be part of the inner circle of Sandra's family. Your money was funding her social climbing." After Frank left, I received an unexpected visit from Natalie herself. Unlike Frank, she showed no remorse. "I hear you're strong-arming Jackson for money," she said, perched uncomfortably on the edge of my sofa. "I'm asking for what's rightfully mine," I corrected. "Though I'm curious, why are you here? This doesn't concern you." Her perfect mask slipped slightly. "Frank is upset. Jackson is upset. That makes it my business." "No," I said firmly. "What happens between me and my son is not your business, just as being his mother was never your role to claim." "I was only trying to help," she insisted. "Jackson was embarrassed by your situation. I offered an alternative that made everyone more comfortable." "Everyone except me," I pointed out. "Tell me, did you enjoy it? Watching me be humiliated, taking credit for raising a son you've barely known?" She had no good answer and left shortly after, her carefully constructed poise notably shaken. The most surprising conversation came from Sandra, who arrived one afternoon with a small plant and an awkward apology. "I got caught up in it all," she admitted. "The perfect wedding, impressing my parents, fitting into what I thought was expected of me. And calling another woman my son's real mother, was that part of the perfect wedding too?" She flinched. "I have no excuse for that. It was cruel, and I'm deeply ashamed." She hesitated before adding, "I'm not sure our marriage will survive this. What I saw in Jackson that night, the way he could so casually hurt the person who gave him everything, it terrifies me." I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. People show you who they are in moments of stress. Pay attention to what you've seen. Before she left, she pressed an envelope into my hand. Inside was a check for $20,000. "It's from my personal account," she explained. "The first installment on what we owe you." When Jackson finally approached me about reconciliation, I was recovering from my surgery. The procedure had been successful in reducing the visible mass, though some asymmetry remained. I felt more like myself than I had in years. Not because of the physical change, but because of my reclaimed self-respect. "I was wrong," Jackson said, sitting beside my hospital bed. "What I did was unforgivable." "Yes, it was." I agreed, offering neither absolution nor condemnation. "I want to fix this," he pleaded. "Tell me how to make it right." I studied my son, this man I had raised who had become someone I didn't recognize and who perhaps was trying to find his way back. "Repay the money, every cent of it," I began. "Not because I need it, though I do, but because you need to understand the magnitude of what you took from me." He nodded. "And understand this forgiveness, if it comes, will not be quick or easy. Trust is rebuilt slowly, one honest interaction at a time. I will no longer accept being treated as less than I am. Your mother who loves you, but does not need your approval to have worth." 1 year has passed since that wedding day that changed everything. My neck still bears the marks of my health journey, but I carry myself differently now. The surgery reduced the visible tumor significantly, though some asymmetry remains, a reminder of all I've overcome. The money has been repaid in full thanks in part to pressure from Sandra's family, and in part to Jackson's gradual understanding of the harm he caused. I used it wisely this time, establishing a proper retirement fund, creating an emergency medical account, and donating a portion to a foundation that helps people with facial differences afford reconstructive surgery. With another portion, I opened a small bookstore cafe, a dream I had set aside decades ago while raising Jackson. Second Chapter Books has become a community gathering place, hosting support groups for people with visible differences and their families. The work is fulfilling in ways my insurance career never was, allowing me to create a space where everyone is valued, regardless of appearance. Jackson and I are rebuilding our relationship, though it bears little resemblance to what we had before. We meet monthly for coffee. Our conversations are sometimes awkward, sometimes heartfelt, always honest. He has apologized countless times, and while the words themselves cannot erase what happened, his consistent actions since then suggest genuine remorse. Sandra filed for separation 6 months after the wedding, unable to reconcile herself with the man she saw revealed that night. I kept thinking, if he could do that to his mother, what would he do to me when I was no longer convenient or perfect? She told me during an unexpected lunch. They are in counseling now, the outcome uncertain. Frank and Natalie have faded back to the periphery of Jackson's life, their brief resurgence of interest waning when they realized he was no longer their path to social advancement. Frank called recently asking for another chance to explain himself. I declined. Some chapters are better left closed. Sarah remains my steadfast friend, and through her, I've connected with new people who accept me as I am. I even began dating again, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. Thomas, a literature professor I met at a book club, has become a steady presence in my life. He sees my scars, both visible and invisible, and values me, not despite them, but including them as part of who I am. The greatest change, though, is within myself. I no longer seek approval or acceptance from others to validate my worth. I no longer minimize myself to make others comfortable. I no longer fund my own erasure. The lesson I learned through pain and betrayal is one I wish I had understood decades earlier. True love does not require perfection or ask you to make yourself smaller. True love, whether from a child, a partner, or a friend, embraces all of you, imperfections included. And true self-love means never allowing anyone to treat you as less than the complete worthy human being you are. My story isn't about vengeance or even justice. It's about reclaiming dignity after it was stripped away by the person I least expected to hurt me. It's about learning that while a mother's love may be unconditional, her self-respect cannot be. It's about discovering that sometimes the strongest act of love, both for yourself and others, is establishing boundaries that protect your fundamental worth. As I stand behind the counter of my bookstore, arranging a display of memoirs about resilience, I catch a glimpse of my reflection in the window. I see a woman who no longer hides, who no longer apologizes for taking up space in the world. I see someone who has learned that the approval of others is not the currency by which she measures her value. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have walked away silently like I did, or confronted the betrayal in the moment? Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with someone you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and self-discovery. Remember, your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to honor yourself. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to stand in your truth, whatever challenges you may face.